that. So for those of you that do not know who Raritan Headwaters is, I would just quickly go through a couple of slides here to give you a brief introduction of who we are. Get my, excuse me. Our mission. So we established Raritan Headwaters in 1959, 65 years ago. And our mission has always been the same: clean, safe water for all. This is a map of our watershed area, and the south branch of the Raritan River begins way up in the Bud Lake, and it travels south, and the north branch of the Raritan River begins way up in Mendham Township, which also travels south, and where the two rivers meet at the confluence becomes the main branch of the Raritan River. The Raritan River is the longest continuous river in the state of New Jersey. It supplies water not only to the watershed area residents, but to 1.5 plus million people downstream of us. This is our one slide tells all. We do a lot of work here at Raritan Headwaters. We're a small but mighty staff, and we have a large dedicated staff of volunteers, and we monitor streams. We repair and restore riparian buffers. We're taking down some dams. We promote best practices. We advocate for best policies throughout our region. We do a lot of outreach and educational work as well. Just let you see, it takes a while to read all of that, but we can talk more about that another time. This is our watershed report card. Every year we put this together. It's based on all of the monitoring that we've done throughout the year. Biological, macroinvertebrates. We also do bacterial, temperature, lots of other types of things. And this comes out every year. And we are hoping that next year we will be able to come to towns and present a town-specific watershed report card. Right now, we are working on a watershed restoration plan with the Rutgers folks. We received a grant for the Highlands Council. I'm looking to have 21 different towns participate in this plan. It's the towns that are within our watershed area, as well as the Highlands region, the north and the south branch of the Raritan River and the Black River. Meet 1 to 2 times per quarter. We're looking for critical local information regarding frequent flooding in your town, stream erosion, scouring, stormwater management challenges, maybe you have some detention ponds that need addressing. This is all information that we're looking to gather from your municipality if you're within one of these regional towns. So contact me if you'd like to be part of that. So we do watershed tools for local leaders. Sorry, folks. Provides practical guidance on scientific principles, useful tools, government regulations, and funding sources for watershed protection. These seminars and workshops are offered to decision makers and other local leaders. The goal is to provide expert level knowledge through interactive discussions, take-home materials, hands-on planning. Workshops are presented by Raritan scientists, expert policy people, as well as visitors from regulatory agencies, universities, and other nonprofit organizations. In addition, participants and presenters learn from one another's experience and find ways to help protect and restore our water resources. Always looking for suggestions and feedback from municipal folks. We want to know what you want to hear about. We want to know what speakers you'd like to hear from. And this is just a quote that I really like from Luna Leopold. So I'm ready to introduce our presenters. I would like to first go over some housekeeping rules. Please, if you get a chance, please type your name and affiliation into our chat. We do have a Q&A. So as you think of questions, please type them into there for us. We'll hold all questions to the end. So Samantha is our first presenter. LaRocca, she is our well test manager. She joined Raritan Headwaters in 2022 to coordinate the distribution and collection of well test kits to residents who are interested in testing their drinking water. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and a minor in Environmental Health from Westchester University. She interned at Save Barnegat Bay during her college career, and she served 2 terms as an AmeriCorps Watershed Ambassador for the Monmouth Watersheds. After Samantha, we will hear from Kristen Sargent. She is the Environmental Health Specialist at Montgomery Township. She has BS in Public Health, and she's been working at on the local public health level for 25 years. Montgomery is unique in that they have a septic system management licensing program. Thanks for agreeing to share with us the ins and outs of this program, Kristen. Really looking forward to hearing about your program down there in Montgomery Township. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, Ed Clarico. He is a licensed engineer, professional licensed engineer, and a LEED, LEED accredited professional. He has 39 years of experience in water resource management and is the founder and former president of Applied Water Management, Inc. and CEO of Natural Systems Utilities. He's an innovator and entrepreneur in the field of sustainable infrastructure. He's noted for making a significant achievements in the practices of wastewater reuse and carbon waste reuse. He has recently been appointed to a technical advisory panel working for the National Water Research Institute and the Water Environmental Research Foundation on developing guidelines for distributed water reuse. Previously held executive roles with American Water as a technical development director and VP of strategy. Mr. Clarico is a principal investigator on research sponsored by the Water Environment Research Federation and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. And he recently serves as chair of WEF's Distributed Water Infrastructure Task Force, a busy fellow. Also works on sustainable agriculture projects, and he operates Clarico Farm, early adopter of hazelnut-based agroforestry farm. Well, I might have to have you come back and speak about that. And that's really interesting. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and let Samantha share hers. Hi, Samantha.
Hello, hello.
How are you? Sorry for all that crazy confusion. Okay, honey, you're up.
Don't worry. I'm just going to confirm that everybody can see my PowerPoint in front of them.
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Tracy, for that very nice introduction. My goal today is to keep all this information nice and concise. So as the manager of the well testing program at Raritan Headwaters, I'll briefly be discussing today the importance of septic system maintenance for well water users in particular. So first, I'd like to give a brief introduction into why this topic is particularly applicable, not only in New Jersey, but in our region of New Jersey in particular. So it's important to note that only public water systems and public water supplies are protected under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So what this means is that well water users are solely responsible for the quality and safety of their drinking water. And knowing this, it's important to note that our watershed is primarily well water users. The majority of the residents that live within our watershed utilize private wells for their drinking water supply. That number comes out to about 80% of the residents in the Upper Raritan watershed rely on that well water. And knowing that many harmful drinking water contaminants lack any discerning tastes, smells, or visuals, testing your water is the only way to know the quality and the potability of the water that you are consuming and your family's consuming. It's important to note that coliform bacteria, which we'll be discussing in detail in just a little bit in this following conversation. In addition to coliform bacteria, nitrates, those two are recommended to test for annually if you are a private well owner. So while there are naturally occurring contaminants that well water has the hazards, the risks, things like arsenic and radionuclides such as radium and uranium, those are those naturally occurring contaminants. Other contaminants are the result of human activity. So groundwater is susceptible to both point source and non-point source pollutants. Some of these examples may include stormwater runoff, industry, agriculture, and you guessed it, mismanaged septic systems. But by managing your septic system, it is really vital to ensure that you're not introducing harmful bacteria into your water supply or your neighbor's water supply as well. So if you take a look at the visual on my screen in the presentation, you'll see that homes that both have wells and septic systems essentially just have two separate holes in their yards on their property. One of these holes is intended to treat and dispose of domestic waste onto your property's soil, while the other hole is intended to pull water up from the aquifer for consumption. And now we want to note, many of these holes are often not too far away from each other, which, as you could guess, may pose some issues. So while regulations state that septic tanks must be a minimum distance from a well, they do change with local ordinances, they do vary. This does not automatically guarantee that issues will not arise between these two systems. Wastewater contains harmful bacteria, viruses, and nutrients that can make you or your family sick if it comes in contact with your well water. Contamination risk can vary, based on multiple factors. So, for example, if groundwater flow beneath the septic system flows in the path of a well, known as down gradient, it has a higher risk of being contaminated. And this is primarily because the groundwater flowing underneath the drain field of a septic will capture any of those remaining contaminants that have not been removed. You can see that pretty well in the visual on the screen under the groundwater flow direction. You can see that's right underneath the drain field. And if that flow is moving towards the well, you can see that those contaminants could be collected as it moves before it's being drawn up into the well. I also want to point out, it's important to keep in mind that as New Jersey is the most densely populated state, the risk is higher if there's many homes on septic systems near that well. So, more septics in the area, more wells in the area, especially if they're close together, could create some potential issues as well. Additionally, if there's a lack of proper pumping or overuse of the septic, this can cause things like flooding, and sewage could, surface in your yard or even back up into your home. Of course, we want to avoid things like that for very obvious reasons. And when these things can happen, if they're not being maintained properly, if there's a mismanaged system, when these things happen, there's a potential for harmful bacteria has the opportunity to enter the water, especially if the well has also not been maintained properly. If there's risks to the structural casing of the well itself, or if the well head has not been sealed properly, these are also greater risks for contamination to enter the well, not only within the ground and the groundwater, but also from surface water runoff as well. Alrighty. So as noted before, if those types of, contamination issues were to happen, they would likely not cause any noticeable changes to the water to really identify that water you're now drinking has been contaminated with bacteria in particular. So essentially, you wouldn't know unless you test if your water is contaminated with that bacteria. And if fecal coliform or E. coli have entered the water, there is a very high risk for transmitting disease. Now, I did jump a little early on that last slide, so forgive me. So you got a little sneak peek into the next conversation that I wanted to get into. So now that we've discussed bacterial contamination, let's briefly talk about other types of contaminants that could enter the groundwater through septic systems. You may have heard of septic safe household products, and as you can guess, there is a very deliberate intention for these products. Many types of common household products have harmful man-made chemicals in them that can be known as volatile organic compounds, or PFAS, known as per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. PFAS has been getting a lot of coverage in the news. There's been a lot of discussions, and more data is coming out about it. But essentially, there are very common chemicals, whether it's volatile organics or PFAS, that are often used in the homes. And as you look on the screen in front of us, you'll see some of those examples of volatile organics in particular, from additives, carpet backing, dyes, toilet cleaner. That's incredibly common, and that's going directly into your septic, things like that. Like disinfectants, for example, many personal care products, paints, and solvents. Now, when these products are used or improperly disposed of, by potentially being poured down the drain, these chemicals could potentially leak into the groundwater as they move through the septic system. So many volatile organics and PFAS are fast moving and persistent, and they may have some particularly harmful health effects to those drinking the water if there are high detection levels within that drinking water. And similarly, this is another reason to never dispose of unused medicines down the drain or toilet. All of these things should be disposed of properly, whether that's reading the back of the bottle, finding resources from your local health department, the DEP, EPA, etc. So now that we've discussed the hazards to well water that a mismanaged septic system might face, I want to remind everyone that there are various ways to proactively avoid these issues and protect the health of not only yourself, but your families, your friends, and your neighbors. I'm sure other presenters today might highlight some of these important reminders, but do remember that proper maintenance of a septic system, coupled with the annual screening of your well water, particularly for bacteria and nitrates, are a very important start. So I do want to highlight that the Raritan Headwaters well testing program really aims to make well water testing convenient, affordable, and accessible to the many well owners throughout the watershed who often also own septic systems on that same property. If you have any interest in testing your well, we offer many more contaminants other than just bacteria and nitrates. But you can either visit testmywell.org, or you'll see plenty of my contact information on the screen here. I'm sure you can also reach out to Tracy, who can get you in touch with me. But I wanted to thank you all for your time, and any questions can be directed at me at the Q&A at the end.
Thank you, Samantha. Okay. Hi, Kristen. You.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Are you able to share your screen?
Yep, you ready?
We're ready. Thanks for
All
joining
right.
us, Kristen.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. You have to make
Are we
it larger.
good?
You're good. You
Okay.
just have to click the
The
screen.
slideshow? Yeah.
Yeah, the slideshow.
Hold on.
I think it's at the bottom somewhere. Oh, wait, there it is at the top.
Right here.
Top left.
Okay. Good?
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. My name's Kristen. I've been working for Montgomery Township for a long time now. We are one of the few municipalities that have an active licensing program for our septic system. Septic management has become even more important with the increase of the advanced wastewater treatment systems. They need a lot more maintenance. They have a lot of more technical parts that need to be serviced on a regular basis. So just roughly to give you some ideas about Montgomery Township, we are 34 square miles located north of Princeton. We have a population of about 24,000 residents. About more than half of the single family homes in the township are served by private septic systems. We have approximately 3,021 septic systems within the township. Again, our management is very proactive and unique. So just briefly, I just want to explain the difference between a conventional system and the advanced system. The conventional septic system consists of a septic tank There may or may not be a pump tank, but that just depends on soil conditions and elevations. From the septic tank, it's going to go into the distribution box. The effluent is distributed evenly throughout the laterals where there's stone, filters bacteria and viruses. And in Montgomery, because we have shale soil, all of our systems are fill replace systems. So they have C33 sand, which is used to treat the effluent and then dispose of it back into the groundwater. So this uses an anaerobic process. The advanced wastewater systems, there's some that use an aerobic process like JET, Norweco, and the Hoot systems. They blow air into the effluent, which acts as a pre-treatment for the sewage. There's also systems, peat moss and cocoa filters that use peat moss and coconut husks to filter out the effluent before it goes into the zone of disposal. So that's just the basic difference. And there is a difference between these in our licensing process. So here you can just see an image of what an aeration tank looks like. There's a settling chamber, an aeration chamber, and then the clarification chamber. In the EcoFlow cocoa filter system, those are actually coconut husks in there that filter the effluent. So why do we need to maintain them? We need to maintain them because improperly maintained septic systems can contaminate the water, like Samantha said. That's really the number one. They can discharge viruses and bacteria into surface water and drinking water. The second biggest thing is that maintaining a septic system is one of the ways to prolong its life. In Montgomery Township, the average cost of a 4-bedroom septic system today is about $50,000 to $60,000. Now, most of us don't have that kind of money laying around, and if we do, we don't really want to spend it on a septic system. So, how to maintain a septic? So you want to pump the septic tank every 3 to 5 years. It does depend upon usage. If you have a family of 10, you need to pump it a lot more often than a family of 3. In Montgomery Township, we require every household to pump it every 3 years, regardless of the number of residents. You also want to use water efficiently. You can install low flow faucets and toilets. And you do not want to flush diapers, cat litter, feminine hygiene products, coffee grounds, grease, chemicals, all those things Samantha mentioned. You do not want to flush those in the toilet. You also do not want to plant trees or bushes within 10 feet of the disposal field because the roots will actually infiltrate the pipes and clog them. You don't want to drive heavy vehicles over the septic components, and you do not want to locate structures such as sheds, pergolas, playgrounds on top of the septic components. Here we just have 2 pictures. This is what it would look like. Should you find this in your backyard, you have a problem. This is septic effluent surfacing onto the surface of the ground. This is a camera image. The camera is inserted into the laterals and you can see all of the root infiltration that's happening because trees are planted too close. These are more root pictures. As you can see, these roots, it's incredible. They will completely clog these laterals. So it's really can be a big issue. We have sewage coming out of an inspection port. And we have a leaking septic tank located under a gravel driveway. So, Montgomery Township started their wastewater management district back in 1989. The NJDEP proposed drastic changes to the septic regulations, and these proposed changes included mandated on-site wastewater management development for every town. So this mandate for the management program was eventually withdrawn from the proposals. However, Montgomery Township was experiencing a very rapid increase in the construction of houses serviced by septic systems. There were concerns about nitrate elevations and bacterial contamination. So the Board of Health decided to keep this regulation and pass an ordinance. They were the first municipality to adopt the model ordinance proposed by NJDEP. So our ordinance requires all properties serviced by a septic system that have been built, altered, or repaired since the ordinance passed, which was late 1989, to be enrolled in the septic management program. So the way we do this is before receiving a certificate of occupancy or a permit to do repairs, if a system is not already enrolled in the program, they are required at that time to fill out an application and pay the appropriate fees. So what are our fees? For the conventional system, it runs on a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years, we send out notices and say it's time for you to pump your septic tank. If you haven't, they need to provide us with a copy of the pumping receipt and a $60 fee. The advanced treatment systems are different because the septic regulations require these systems have a continuous maintenance contract that contains biannual service visits. So we have to renew these properties every year. So the fee we charge for these is $25, and we ask them to provide proof that they have a maintenance contract and a copy of their most recent service visit. In addition, we do charge $15 a month, a late fee. So this is to try to get people to stay on top of this and not get behind. So our current status is that we have approximately 75% of our septic systems have been enrolled in the licensing program. We're using a web-based program called GovPilot, which other municipalities may use for other licensing things to track the properties. It's difficult. There are issues with the program. We're constantly adjusting it. But the program is nice because it allows applicants to renew online. They can pay with a credit card, upload their documents, and renew their license. So that's benefit for them. In our office, we can only collect cash or checks. So that can be very inconvenient for people sometimes. And our goal is to go paperless with the web-based program. But so far, we haven't been able to do that. So there is a lot of envelope stuffing and postages required to send out renewal notices. We also struggle to keep up with property transfers. We're not automatically notified if somebody sells their home, if the property is vacant or foreclosed. So we only find out about that when the mail gets returned as undeliverable. So that's something we struggle with. The only final option we have is issuing a summons to appear in municipal court for this. So if somebody refuses to comply and we issue a summons and they don't show up for court, basically nothing happens because the municipal court will not issue they can't issue bench warrants for municipal ordinances. So that's a limitation. We have an estimated 700 properties that are grandfathered at this time because they have not been repaired since 1990. This can be a concern because we get pushback from some of the residents requiring this. Some people live next door to someone else who doesn't have to license their septic because they haven't repaired it or replaced it. So that becomes a little bit of an issue. And then other people don't like the $60 fee. And Montgomery has relatively high taxes, and they definitely feel like they pay enough in taxes and don't like paying the extra $60. But it is what it is. So this is just a screenshot of what our GovPilot program looks like. This is where we enter the information, when the date of the pumping was, owner's information. You can upload and save attached documents to this. So that's just what that looks like. But I would say it's community education is essential. We get a lot of people in Montgomery Township who move from urban areas and they don't even know what a septic is. They don't know what it is. They don't know they need to maintain it and they don't know how to maintain it. So we try to do tabling and outreach at community events. We do newsletter articles. Township has e-bulletins that send out updates with reminders about the importance of maintaining. And our health department website has a lot of information about septic maintenance on it as well. When we do get new systems installed, we make sure to send them out a pamphlet on how to maintain a septic and what they need to do to prolong its life. So that's basic overview of our program. And thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, I'll take them at the end.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. I learned a lot. Hello, Ed.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here. I am
Sure.
so excited to hear about what you do.
So let me share my
Highly
screen.
recommended.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Do you see my screen?
Yep, there it is. Just have to make it
Okay.
bigger.
Yeah.
Yep, there you go. Click on the little thing there.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me provide some information about what we call alternative wastewater systems, and kind of goes along with what Kristen was talking about with the advanced. And actually, it started with advanced systems many years ago. So just to be clear about some of the distinctions I want to make is that the decentralized septic system option, which is what we've been talking about so far today, is on private property, and it generally has the ownership of the asset is privately owned, and it's the responsibility of the private individual to maintain and be in compliance with how that system performs. There's a tremendous amount of variability around the use of the properties that affect this, as well as the site characteristics of the property that influence how well that works and how expensive that is, and what type of risks come with those alternatives. And what Montgomery Township is doing with the septic management program is great. And it's good to see that those type of programs are finally making their way forward. We got pulled into alternative systems because there was a day when there was not adequate service from centralized wastewater systems. New Jersey was growing, and individual septic systems really didn't quite rise to the level of service needed to take care of the needs of the individuals. So the ideas first started what we call a community on-site wastewater system. This goes back to 1984. And I can remember back when Hermie Lechner was working on the alternative stormwater management, and we were looking at stormwater utilities at that time. We ventured into this community on-site wastewater approach where you have the homes on septic systems and variable grade sewers, and all the effluent from the septics, instead of going to each home's septic system, goes to a treatment plant that treats it to a high level and then recharges the aquifer in one location. And in this picture, and this is an old picture taken with a 35 millimeter camera of an artist's rendering, which was used at an environmental commission or planning board meeting back then. I don't remember, but it started a movement towards having alternatives of this nature exist, where you could keep the suburban rural character of the towns and have services to homeowners that were kind of like septic services to some degree, but they were like public services to the degree that the homeowner was no longer directly responsible for the compliance and the behavior of these. There ultimately were 20 of these built in New Jersey, became part of a utility that was regulated by the BPU. And they were pretty cool because they're like really tiny, friendly in your backyard type wastewater systems that overcome some of the challenges of septic systems and overcome the challenges of big centralized systems. And so that was a picture I took back in those days of what was Village Square in Union Township. And being you asked me to speak about this, I went on Google Earth and found the current street view of that building today. And it's still there and thriving, and it's still operated as a little utility. Now, this is Village Square as it was envisioned, and back then there was a lot of conversations around open space preservation and limiting sprawl by building homes on smaller lots and allowing open space around the property. So this is a current aerial view, so it's changed dramatically from what it was 30 some years ago. But this was the outline of a farm, and the homes are on quarter-acre lots with individual septics and effluent collection lines that take the effluent down here to this little treatment plant I just showed you a picture of, and then recharges the area up here where there are recharge fields. So it gives the engineer the opportunity of finding the best soils on the site for recharge and designing a treatment system that removes the nutrients and pathogens and everything else that would be typically relied on by the septic field and the septic tank. So it behaves as a mini treatment plant. And this was a trend for some time. But of course, as you look at this option, you still have all the water from these homes that has to go into the ground. And if I go back to this picture, we used to refer to this as indirect water reuse, which is essentially what a septic is. You're using water, you're putting it into the ground. If you have wells, you're taking the water out. And as long as the time of travel is adequate and the soils and geology in between are adequate, you have a safe system for a long time if it's well maintained, which is what we've been talking about. But some sites don't have adequate soil, or maybe the uses are more concentrated that this doesn't quite work. So we developed the idea of what's called direct non-potable reuse, where this water is so clean, you could use it for non-potable purposes, such as flushing toilets, irrigating lawns, for cooling systems, and now we're using it for laundry, and greatly reduce the amount of water that has to be recharged into the ground. That option caught on, and a number of systems were built of that nature. This one was in Hillsborough. Not to confuse you though, this is a picture of a system similar to the one in Union Township, where each home has a septic system and a treatment plant. That's the treatment plant there, and there's a recharge area over here near the treatment plant. And these are also on quarter-acre lots. In this case, a developer had 3 farms and preserved 2 of the farms and put all the homes on 1 farm. And so they were able to get some farmland preservation out of it without having to buy the land. So, as I said, that progressed into direct non-potable reuse. And this is a illustration of a building in New York City, but I don't have pictures of where this started, because it started in Montgomery Township, of all places. Montgomery's always been pretty creative and open-minded about alternatives. And it was built, a system like this was built for the Squibb Convitec building on Route 206, which is now where the Montgomery Township municipal offices are. And it was there and operated for some 20 years, recycling water to inside the building where there were offices. And if this was an office building pictured here, this is actually a residential building. The amount of reuse you could get in an office building is in the area of 90%, because most of the water is used for flushing toilets in office buildings. and for cooling. And if you have it set up for cooling and for toilet flushing, you'll get it well over 95%. In a residential setting where you're using the water for toilet flushing, laundry, cooling tower makeup, and irrigation, we get about a 55% reduction in the water consumption and approximately a 65% reduction in the amount of discharge, because part of this is an evaporative use. These cooling towers use the water and evaporate it, so it's lost to the atmosphere. This has all sorts of benefits that were not quickly realized, other than saving water, which is why this was done originally. You're treating wastewater to a higher level than you would if you were discharging it to a stream, just because of the way the regulations work. The public health regulations for indoor reuse are stricter. You're reducing loads on sewers if these buildings are on sewer systems. You can capture stormwater in systems like this, and because you have the treatment mechanism in place, you could reuse stormwater directly also. And we've come to discover you can get a real bump in energy efficiency if these treatment systems are located in buildings or very close to the buildings that the wastewater is generated from, because wastewater tends to be very warm because we use a lot of hot water. And we throw all that energy away when we put it into our septic system or into the sewer. If you catch that energy in the reservoir that you build to collect this water, it's a real easy improvement to put a heat pump on it and transfer that energy into the incoming water that you're using to make your hot water. So we did one pilot project of this nature in New York City and found that the energy conserved from the thermal energy transfer, it's called, is a little bit more than the energy it takes to treat the wastewater. So that's considered a net positive energy application that saves water and saves energy at the same time. Some unique attributes of this methodology is you got to plan it when you're planning your buildings. It's a little hard to retrofit this. We typically do all this as design, build, and operate, because you need to have what's now referred to as a responsible management entity that assumes the responsibility for the performance of the system and the customer satisfaction with the services that they're getting. So it looks like a utility, but it's not regulated like utilities quite yet. Similar, but different. And so it becomes what's known as distributed infrastructure that's smaller than the centralized infrastructure, but relieves the individual property owner of having the burden of an on-site system. And this model really took off, to our surprise. I grew up in Hillsborough Township on a dairy farm. I worked on innovative septic systems for years in the rural areas that didn't have adequate sewer capacity. And I never would have ever believed I'd be working in New York City. But when the green building movement started, they were looking for options to how they could do water conservation in innovative ways. This was picked up by a building called the Solaire, this building here in Battery Park City, and an area of New York City called Battery Park City, which is this whole block of land on the southwest corner of Manhattan, was regulated under a rigorous set of environmental performance standards for developers to come in and compete for the rights to build for long-term leases on this land. They had to score points, and water conservation was an early one. After we did this one system, we started doing all the remaining systems in Battery Park City. So there's 6 of them in Battery Park City and 4 others in other areas of the city around Manhattan and Queens. And I just show this. This is where it's headed. This is a non-potable water reuse system in Brooklyn that's under construction. It's for 5 high-rise buildings. It's 400,000 gallons a day. It starts to get to the scale that some people would think, well, this is a centralized system. But it's not. It's a treatment plant built under a park here called Domino Park that takes the water from these buildings, treats it, reuses what's necessary for the buildings. But what's not necessary, that other 40%, is released to the East River as very clean water that's cleaner than the East River water. and certainly cleaner than putting it in the New York City sewer here, because there's a combined sewer overflow right about here. So if you've ever heard of combined sewer overflow or CSO problems, it's a big issue in urban areas. Now, instead of just being used for water conservation, this is now also being used for flood mitigation or overflowing of sewers as a way to relieve the load on the sewer. So it's good for recharging aquifers when you don't have good soils. It's good for relieving the burden on sewers when your sewers are overloaded. And it's good for water conservation if that's not abundant and that becomes a risk. So I tell you, it's been a long time, 35 years of this, 20 years in residential applications. Superstorm Sandy was a great proof of concept for us. There were 80 systems in the Superstorm Sandy path. Had no violations, and we had a bit of a fire drill to keep systems operating with fuel for emergency generators. But other than that, there were no violations. And as soon as the storm was over, every system was back online fully without any interruption of service at the customers. So there's lots of reasons for that, which I won't go into too much detail today because we don't have the time. But through this distributed mechanism, you're building systems away from flood areas typically, and you're building them in areas that when there is a problem, you may have some problems, but they're smaller problems and you can recover from them and have a much better resiliency than you would if you had one big system serving everything to go down, as happened with Superstorm Sandy. I'm sure we remember there were some systems down for a month or more, discharging raw sewage. There's regulations coming across the country now, New York, California. New York and California were the two hot spots where this was happening, mostly for us. Colorado, Texas now, Hawaii, or others are evolving regulations to make these type of alternatives easier to accomplish, because not having regulations isn't a good thing because people are confused and don't know when something's allowed and not allowed. There's some greenhouse gas regulations passing that help promote this because it has a benefit from a greenhouse gas reduction attribute. And you can build these kind of rapidly. We call it just in time. You build it for the need, customized to the customer, what they need for that time. And that's a different approach than building centralized systems that take a long time to plan and finance and build. And you're building it fit to purpose, so it's going to be specifically for the uses, as Convitec was specifically for that use at Squibb. We have systems that serve NFL stadiums that are designed for stadium uses, which, as you may know, has interesting load dynamics because of halftime shows and what happens with the water consumption and waste loads and highly variable situations. And there's a whole array of examples. There's about 50 specifically like this around the country now operating. But it's been a very slow uptake and adaptation of this. And in preparing for this, I look back to some old pictures. That's a picture of me a lot of years ago drinking the water from a non-potable water reuse system because it is that safe. It wouldn't meet the potability requirements under the U.S. Safe Drinking Water Act, but that's only because of the salt content. We don't desalinate it, and it would have a TDS level that's a secondary parameter higher than you would allow to be drinking it. You don't want to be drinking it all the time. We don't, but on occasion, to prove a point, we will consume a little. So I don't want to run over, cut me off here if I'm taking too much time, but there's a whole investigation. I circulated a document to you, Tracy, that you can distribute as you want. We worked for 2 years for a task force on the Water Environment Federation, trying to get our heads around it. Why isn't this happening more? How do we bring this into the understanding of municipal officials and engineers and all the practitioners that there are options sometimes that are good from an economic and environmental standpoint? And so we did a deep dive with about 60 people. It took 2 years. We wrote a technical paper that you can get a copy of and read all about the nuances of this. And we look at this from the perspective of we're all after the same goal: safe, affordable, dependable, sustainable water. There are barriers to this. Sometimes regulation isn't readily accepted. Affordability is a challenge everywhere. These systems are now affordable and sometimes economically advantageous. There's budget, there's risk, there's adversity with regards to the various players in this circle. And there's lots of opportunities that I've already talked about. So we look at this as though there's an owner segment, the people that own the assets. They're typically municipalities or sewage authorities or water authorities, tend to be governmental agencies unless you have a septic system. In that case, it's you, it's the property owner, you're the owner. And you have the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are the people that use the service, they're connected to it. And the people in the communities that might not use the service, but benefit by having a cleaner environment because they're getting more resilient water in the area and lower levels of pollution and whatnot. And these beneficiaries pay for the services and they pay taxes. The owners get the fees that the beneficiaries pay. The controllers are the government, regulatory bodies that define what risks are tolerable, what performance standards are required, and manage a lot of the finance in terms of how much tax money goes up here and comes down through the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drink Water Act to help supplement the owners' budgets and costs. It's fascinating. There's actually an unfair dynamic to this because the people on septic systems, I saw something where Kristen had that in one of her slides, are paying taxes that we do all pay federal taxes. They all do go up to pay for the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drink Water Act, and that money typically does not go back to septic system owners. So feel as you may about that, that's just the situation as it's been. And we're working on opening up avenues for some of that financing to flow back, at least to the distributed systems. And then there's a whole world of implementers, from engineers, manufacturers, service providers that design, build, and manufacture the equipment that's required that go into this. And all of these segments have a voice in what happens and what drives forward this models that we use to achieve safe, affordable infrastructure. So this is a cover page of the report. There's a QR code there if you wanted to get it, to just download it. But I also sent a copy over to Tracy, and she could potentially email it around to everybody. Okay, I hope I haven't run over.
No, I think you're good. Thank
Okay.
you so much. We
Yep.
have definitely a lot of time for questions. So if you just stop sharing your screen, Ed,
Okay, let me see how I do that.
and
Stop sharing. There we go.
and my friend and colleague Bill Kibler, still there, Bill? New Bill. I'm just gonna do Q and, oh, here he is. Hang on. Hi, Bill.
Tracy.
How
How
are
are
you?
you?
I'm well. How are you? I learned a lot today. Did you
Good.
learn a lot?
I tell you what, this was fascinating. I really appreciate the panelists being here, all of them, because that was some really amazing stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So were there many questions? Bill,
There are a few
Bill's
questions
gonna
here in
field the
the
questions for us, so
Q&A.
I'll hand it
Yeah,
over
and
to
if any
you,
other
Bill.
folks have questions, feel free to post them in the
Raise your
Q&A so
hand.
everybody can
Yep.
see them, and we'll sort through them. Let me just throw a couple out that were already asked and answered, but I don't know if everybody had an opportunity to see the answers. Steve Foster asked Kristen how residents and businesses accepted and appreciated the value of the wastewater management district implementation. And Kristen said there were mixed feelings about it. So Kristen, if you're still available, do you want to address this in a little bit more detail? What some of the challenges were with
Yes, sure.
Thanks. Because I think it was a great question. It's really
Yeah,
interesting.
most of the challenges are the people who buy a home and they're not aware of it. So we have a lot of people who move in and they're new owners and they have no idea, and we send them like a notice, and it doesn't really go over too well. But we have a lot of people too, though, who are in agreement with the program and appreciate that we are reminding them to maintain their system. So it's like, I'd say honestly, half and half.
Should. Well, that's interesting, half and half. And you also mentioned in response to a couple of other questions that were asked, so Kristen was asked if the program was solely funded by fees. And you responded that the fees we collect do fund the program, which is the purpose of the licensing fees. So are they, just so I'm clear, Kristen, the
Yes.
fees you collect wholly fund the program? So there isn't.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
the main cost of the program is just postage, printing, office supplies, and then the time that it takes to enter in the information, process the renewals, the administrative work that goes into it.
Excellent, excellent. And you also mentioned that you have educational materials built into your budget. What kind of, can you tell us a little bit about the educational materials that you distribute?
Well, I mean, our budget basically just has a general, educational materials section. So we take money
Okay.
out of that to print brochures, buy pamphlets and stuff. A lot of this stuff we just get from the NJDEP website and reproduce it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important component. I know one of the things that I think we share a common experience with you that you mentioned earlier, and that is when folks move out of the urban areas into the less urban areas, they understand the concept of a well, even if they've never owned one. So, but it's still a learning experience for them. The concept of a septic system, you might as well be talking about another planet. Because when they move up from the urban areas, the whole idea of having a whole septic system in your backyard is just utterly foreign. So I think the education piece of that is really important. I'm glad you guys are doing that. And I see Mara has her hand up. Mara, you got a question, comment, observation? Have at it.
I do. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you, Kristen and Ed. This is fantastic. It's actually really inspiring to see all these new projects, although I will echo Ed's concern that over the last 40 years, we don't see more of them. But my question is actually around the septic management districts. And Kristen, you talked a little bit about this. I'm not sure how yours in Montgomery has been established. It's my understanding, limited understanding, that any governing body or utilities authority can establish one of these septic management districts and then be eligible for financing through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the water bank, which could then actually be used to replace, privately held, individual on-site wastewater systems, septic systems, to replace or, repair, older systems. So you talked about the 700 holdouts in your town. Has Montgomery been set up as a system in that way so that you would then be eligible for that funding, or is there another step in that process to?
We have not, and I'm not really sure about that. It sounds more like that might be part of our stormwater management plan, which our engineering department does, but I know we do not get any funding from that, and I was unaware that that's even a thing.
Okay. I think there's only a couple in the state up in Byram Township and the Lake Mohawk. They have a particular area where they were having some issues with septic systems and established this defined area, and then they were those residents in a similar program, I think, where they have to, you know, indicate that they've done their pumping. But I believe they may then be eligible for those funds. And I've been trying to, you know, find out some more information about that so that we can help promote and talk to municipalities.
Yeah, what
about that.
was the fund? Where was the funding coming from?
The Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the
Okay.
Water Bank. Mhm. I
All
think
right.
it's on the New Jersey Water Bank website, but you know, that's a thought just, you know, for some of our towns, even if it wasn't a whole town, but maybe particular you know, areas that are, you know, particularly close to the
Yes.
river or, you know, have older systems. But thank you so much again for the information. This is fantastic. We'll dive in together. Well, you let me know. what
Yeah,
you
no,
find
thank
out,
you
and I'll
for
do
your
the same.
information. I'm going to look into that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so here's another question for you, Kristen, and I think you've got quite a fan club going here, so we may have to we may have to have you back. Can you explain the difference in your licensing process for an advanced system versus conventional? Specifically, what are the things that you require
Yes.
for the two
So
different systems that are
for
different?
the conventional system, the only maintenance we require is to pump the septic tank every 3 years. The advanced systems require a annual maintenance contract. And that requires 2 service visits per year. So when we renew those, we ask for a copy of the service contract and a copy of the most recent service report.
And when a new system comes online, who does the inspections for you? Do you have someone
For,
in-house do it, or does it? I guess for either system. So if you're having, let's talk about both. If you're having a conventional system built, versus, you know,
the construction
more advanced
inspections?
system. Yeah. Is that
Yes,
all
we
done by
do.
your construction department?
No, the health department does all the construction inspections for septic systems.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you. And Ed, are you still available? I'm gonna corner Ed with a question if he's got a moment.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Ed, you know, one of the things that you talked about and Merritt acknowledged as well is the challenge of trying to get folks to embrace, I don't know if you want to call them non-traditional systems, but systems that aren't either a septic system or a large wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
And you know, part of that is the social pushback on ick. I don't want to drink sewage, for lack of a more delicate way of putting it. What do you see as the social barriers to this sort of, you know, to water reuse being more prevalent in the US? Why aren't we better at it, I guess is what I'm asking. And how do we fix that?
Yeah, there's a large social issue just around, I think, awareness of what Water Environment Federation is promoting this term "one water." That being people, we've fragmented the industry so much into wastewater and water supply and specialty water for industry and whatnot.
Right.
They don't connect with each other. They have different regulations. They have different professionals that service them. They different contractors that work in those circles. And when you start something that talks about one water, where you're taking storm water, you're taking wastewater, you're making water for reuse, and you're trying to mimic the natural water cycle, the economy is just not built around that yet, because that's not what we do. And so we get resistance from the big players that are the big water and wastewater engineers. Because they don't design little systems. It doesn't fit their business model.
Mhm.
And the yuck factor part, I'd say for the most part, that seems to be gone. And I give a lot of credit. Well, I mentioned Montgomery Township before. After we did the Convatec facility, there's one we built for Princeton Montessori School. And when the New York City public health regulators saw that the people of Princeton were satisfied with this alternative for their children. They thought, well, it's got to be good enough for the residents of New York City. And it happens at Battery Park City, happens to be a very high-end area. So having done this in high-end residential buildings kind of removes the image that it's not good enough for me, like,
Right.
well, geez, so that part's changed. But I just think people's connection with water in general and their understanding of how fragmented the industry is, and that doesn't go just for residents, it goes for government too. I mean, we keep it fragmented.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yep. Our wastewater folks and our water supply folks are on different floors if they're in the same building often.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And your comment about the one water approach is interesting. It seems so obvious. I mean, we all, I think everybody on this call probably understands the water, how the water cycle works. So why don't we live our lives that way? That's the way nature functions. But
Well,
yeah, very good.
their report I circulated is really targeted towards watershed type entities that understand enough to, get their head around it. But this report hopefully provides a lot of meaty information around what's possible, why it's not happening, and what it is. So maybe people will start, we hope, waking up to this a little bit more now.
Got it. Ed, do you know if there are other towns that are currently using alternative systems in New Jersey or the surrounding areas? Can you just mention a few of them?
Alternative, like I described, you mean, or
Yes. Yeah.
They were all. There were 20 of them in New Jersey, and they were pretty well spread out around New Jersey. They became a utility regulated by the BPU. We started. It's now owned by American Water, so it's within the
Okay.
American Water portfolio. So it's at least around 5 or 6 different counties. I can't remember exactly where it stretches down. I know Burlington has some. There's some up in Sussex. So they're sprinkled around here and there. And when you look at that map from Superstorm Sandy, there's, a lot of them just up and down the 95 corridor, wherever there were growth pressures and there weren't sewers. Originally, that's what drove it on the East Coast. The model was driven on the West Coast because they were out of water. There were insufficient water supplies. So different drivers, but same outcome.
Got it. All right. Thank you. And Tracy, I think that's it for questions today.
That's it for questions. All right.
And Mara put some information in the chat for everybody on the a link to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and Septic Management District. So there's a link there. So that's a good place for folks to go to if you're looking for some of that grant information.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Ed and Kristen and Samantha. You guys did an awesome job. I think with climate change and global warming upon us, we're going to have to look at more alternative ways to manage our water, whether it be wastewater, sewage water. We've been in a terrible drought here in New Jersey. I've been trying to recycle my dishwater out into my yard, thinking that it's recharging the groundwater. I don't know. That's the extent of my abilities to recycle wastewater. So thank you again, and I will circulate what Ed copied me, and if you could share your presentations with me. Kristen already did, Ed and Samantha. If folks want me to share that, I will as well. And we did record this. This will be going up on our website as well as our YouTube channel. Hopefully by early next week, those will be posted. Folks that were listening in, if you would like to share this with other members of your community, your municipality, have a special meeting and display it, that would be great. I think we need to get the word out there that there are alternative ways in dealing with our wastewaters, our septic waters, and just our drinking water. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And with that, I will bid you all adieu.